Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for the Track 3 installment of our first Noyce PI peer webinar series. My name is Drew Campbell, my pronouns are he, they, and I'm a program associate with the Inclusive STEM Ecosystems for Equity and Diversity, or ICED program at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. This new series, offered in collaboration by AAAS and the NSF Noyce program, centers on developing and implementing grants for the 4 Noyce tracks. Presenters are Noyce PIs who have led multiple grants to prepare and retain STEM teachers in urban and rural high-need schools who have shared research about their work. Presenters will describe their work on the Noyce grant, general and specific issues that can arise, strategies that brought success, and other advice for Noyce project leaders. And as mentioned, today's session focuses on Track 3, the Master Teacher Fellowships track. Before I formally introduce our wonderful speakers and jump into the webinar, I have a few housekeeping notes I'd like to share. The presentation is being recorded. The recording, along with the slide deck used by our speakers, will be made available in the coming weeks on our website at nsfnoyce.org. You'll also receive an email with a link to the recording and slides when they're available. Additionally, we have closed captioning for this workshop, and you can download and view the full transcript by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. So the way this works, we have 3 presenters, and at the end, we'll have an open Q&A discussion, lasts about 20 minutes, but feel free to put questions in the chat as the speakers go through, and they'll either address them during the presentation if they prefer, or we'll save them for the Q&A at the end. And so today, to discuss Track 3, we are honored to be joined by Drs. Matt Campbell, Paige Evans, and Greg Rushton. Dr. Matt Campbell is an Associate Professor of Mathematics Education and the Associate Director of the School of Education at West Virginia University. His current Noyce Award is Mountaineer Mathematics Master's Teachers, supporting teacher leadership and networked improvement of mathematics education in West Virginia. Dr. Paige Evans is Co-Director and Clinical Professor of teachHOUSTON at the University of Houston. Her current Noyce Award is Developing STEM Teacher Leaders in Culturally Responsive Classroom Management, Engineering Design, and Induction. And finally, Dr. Greg Rushton is a professor and the director of Tennessee STEM Education Center at Middle Tennessee State University. His current Noyce Award is Developing Leaders in Education to Advance Data Science Learning in Middle School STEM Classrooms. So thank you all once more for joining us. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to our first speaker, starting with Dr. Campbell. Let me pull down my screens.
All right, thanks, Drew. My slides are showing up here.
Yep, look great to me.
Very good. Thanks, Drew. Hi, everyone. My name's Matt Campbell. I'm at West Virginia University, and I'm the PI of what we call M3T, or Mountaineer Mathematics Master Teachers. We are, of course, are grateful for the support for this work from the National Science Foundation, but we also have support from the West Virginia Department of Education, as well as the districts that we partner with. And I'll say a bit more about that as I give you a sense of the work we do in this project. And we've had previous support, first from a Noyce capacity building grant in 2018. And then we had funding for what was essentially a pilot project from the Benedum Foundation in 2019, and that preceded this current award. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the work we do, but it'll be very short and really just enough to give a sense of some of the issues and solutions that I'm going to highlight. So it's always important, I see, to talk a bit about where M3T started. And M3T really started in schools. A colleague of mine, and actually one of the co-PIs on the project, Joanna Burke-Kinderman, is a instructional coach in Pocahontas County, West Virginia. This is the most rural county east of the Mississippi, in the kind of southeastern part of West Virginia. I got a chance to know Joanna when I started here in 2014. I was particularly interested in teacher collaboration, but also teacher recruitment and retention. She had been working with teachers in this small district to really think differently about not only their own professional development, but the improvement in their classrooms. And this idea at the left of the screen is really core to what she was working on. It starts with being sure that anything you're doing in improvement or in teacher development starts with what bugs teachers, and then that they should have the support and the structure and the tools to really understand those problems and to work in strategic and productive and collaborative ways toward improvement. So it's not about leaving people to their own devices, but it's also really honoring the voice and perspectives of people doing the work in the field. Joanna and I partnered together to think about this work. I tried to learn more about it, and we both had an interest in teacher leadership. And through some mentoring from a colleague of mine here, Dr. Gay Stewart, we were put on a direction to think about a capacity building grant, and then built a team to work on this current Noyce grant. And so so like I said, there's capacity building funding. We had some foundation funding, private foundation funding to support a precursor to this work. And then our current project is what's called a networked improvement community. And our Noyce grant, Track 3 grant, supports fellows from across West Virginia. We have 40 fellows. Now, those are not all funded by the Noyce Award. That is in part where the additional funding from the West Virginia Department of Education comes from. But we have 40 fellows across 30 school districts across West Virginia. That has evolved over time. People have moved and other things, but we also had multiple cohorts. But there are 55 county school districts in West Virginia, so that's pretty exciting to have that amount of coverage with this one project. Even more exciting is that our fellows, part of their teacher leadership journey is not just to be participants in this statewide networked improvement community. And networked improvement community, I'm not going to get into it, but it's a particular type of way that people work together around common problems and working toward improvement. But our fellows are leaders in this statewide network, in part by leading local teams with their colleagues in their schools and their districts. And furthermore, this work has now spread and is now including participation from teachers across additional counties. So we now have, in addition to the 30 counties, we have teachers in 7 additional county school districts participating, all in over 170 teachers at the moment involved, middle and high school math teachers involved in this work. One of the features of a networked improvement community is that you have an aim, and we have 2 aims. One is about math classrooms, and really that students have increased opportunity, and an increasing number of students have that opportunity to what we call do math in math classrooms. Things that might be described by the mathematical practices, things like communicating, reasoning, justifying, making connections, talking with one another about math. We also want to be sure that teachers have a more central place in the implementation of improvement efforts in schools and districts and across the state. And that's a big part of where the teacher leadership theme comes in across our work. So there's a whole lot more to say about what we do, but really that gives you a sense, and if you're familiar with network improvement communities, that might, conjure up some thoughts. But just especially the scope of this project in terms of its spread across the state, I wanted to give that much of a precursor to get into this. So I think what's interesting about a Track 3 project is it's what I call in the wild. You're talking about a project that you can't sort of just sequester to your campus. It's dealing with practicing teachers, at some stage of their career who are participating in your work. And part of the success of that work involves also some sort of a relationship with one or more schools or districts. And these projects play out over a long time, so things could change. And you can't predict every possible turn in the road, but being aware of the very particular nature of this work is important. So I want to quickly highlight 3 issues I've and my team have navigated with this work. We're in the 5th of a 6-year grant. One is that you do have to think about the personal and professional journeys of your fellows across that 5-year commitment they are signing up for. You have to also think about the possible changes and relationship building with leaders across the schools and districts you're working with. And as you saw, we work with many schools and districts. And when you think about teacher leadership, you also have to realize there might be other teacher leaders in these schools and districts, and you have to think about the way that your project works productively with that. And so The first in the wild topic is that as fellows navigate this 5-year commitment, you as a project might need to think how you can accommodate or not the way that fellows might have changes in their professional and personal lives. That could be something like they move schools, or they change even something about their position at their current school. Now, there are, of course, requirements that they are meant to fulfill as part of their fellowship, but you might realize that there's some latitude for what that could mean. We have had fellows who have moved schools or even moved districts, but within West Virginia, that allowed us to continue having them maintain their fellowship and to work around that. That might not look the same for every project, but that would be something for you to consider. There are, of course, instances where someone might need to leave the project or leave the teaching profession entirely. It is part of your proposal for a Noyce project to have that a plan for that laid out, but I'll just say you really want to have that plan laid out. And again, that might involve where is there the flexibility and latitude that maybe someone doesn't have to leave the project. But when they do, you really want to think about that. And you know, unlike paying scholarships through a financial aid office, the idea of making these payments and the possibility that they need to repay it is something you need to work with your institution on, and that might, you know, not be straightforward. So it's time well worth it. But it's also the case that in the solicitation for the grant, there could be conditions under which the need to repay any stipends received up to that point can be waived. And you should think about what the conditions for that are within what's provided in the solicitation. So we've had instances of that, but luckily we had just agreements and processes in place that made that as smooth as possible for everyone. We also have to work with, and any project like this has to work with school and district leaders and the systems themselves. And just like with teachers themselves, those people change. And as you saw, we work across a number of districts and schools. Key for us has been to maintain clear and open communication. And there have been ways we've done that from the start, which is having an annual MOU that gets signed and distributed. Things we've adopted over the years, we have a quarterly newsletter that we send out to get information into multiple people's hands. We also have host calls for district and school leaders to learn more about the project. Those are not always very well attended, but it is definitely an effort that seems to pay off. But the thing that has paid off the most is to empower your fellows themselves to be the primary communicators with their own district and school leaders. That's whose emails and calls are most likely to get answered. And what we've realized too is in a project that's about developing teacher leaders, that is a form of teacher leadership, to empower our fellows and even the colleagues they're working with to be more in communication with other leaders around their district has been a wonderful development that has been a part of this work and has helped advance the work as well by keeping that communication active and open. And the last thing I wanted to highlight, because it's something we ran into even during our capacity building work, and we've tried to be really thoughtful about it, is when you think about the core of this work being practicing teachers taking on teacher leadership roles, that could impinge or be seen as impinging on the other teacher leadership roles that people might assume in schools and districts, people like coaches. And we've even had people who say, okay, well, if that's what the fellows are doing, what does that mean about my job? Or I already do that. I already organize meetings or hold this or do that. So we've had to be responsive to that, and that could look different from setting to setting. But we've also tried to realize that, you know, and actually one thing we realized too is these might be people who reached that point in their career that said, hey, how do I advance? How do I become a leader? And that's how they did it. They did it by leaving the classroom. And here we are providing a way through this grant that actually necessitates people stay in the classroom, right? And so it could create an interesting issue when it comes to the dynamics across people and roles. But we've leaned into that, not just by being responsive about how we're defining who's doing what, but also to involve those coaches. How could they be a part of these local improvement teams that are part of our network? What is the value add for them? We've even hosted, roundtable discussions and a mini network just of coaches, and how valuable that is for them to learn from others across the state in ways that weren't happening before. So a grant like this is a lot about working with people, and some of this has just been the ways we've learned about ways to work with people and the people with whom we're working. And I think if you're open and receptive to those things in your own context, there are ways that what could be a problem it's not just about avoiding a problem, but actually something that strengthens the entirety of the work itself. And as we think about this statewide work, these are things that have really helped move this work along. So that's it for me for now. We'll answer questions later, and you can, of course, reach out to me at any time here. And thank you for the time.
Awesome. Excuse me. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I'll pass it over to our next speaker, Dr. Paige Evans.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. That was a great presentation. And as Drew said, my name is Paige Evans, and I'm a co-director and clinical professor for the Teach Houston program at the University of Houston. Before we get started, I would like to extend my gratitude to the National Science Foundation and the Noyce program for their continued support, as well as the AAAS for this opportunity to share our work. In this presentation, I'm going to provide an overview of the University of Houston, the Teach Houston program, and our Noyce Track 3 grant initiatives, highlighting the challenges, successes, and key lessons learned. Let me start by giving you some context about the University of Houston. We are a public Carnegie-recognized Tier 1 teaching and research institution located in Houston, Texas, the fourth largest city in the U.S. We are a Hispanic serving and an Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander serving institution. That's a mouthful, by the way. The University of Houston is the third largest university in Texas and the second most ethnically diverse major research institution in the U.S. We serve over 46,000 students, with 41.8% being first-generation college students. Within the University of Houston, the Teach Houston program is housed in the College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics. Teach Houston is our STEM teacher preparation program designed to address the shortage of highly qualified STEM teachers in Houston and nationwide. It's a collaboration between the Colleges of Natural Sciences and Mathematics, Education, and local high-need school districts. Students earn both a STEM major and a minor in education in 4 years, thanks to the streamlined degree plans developed by the two colleges. Our research-based curriculum ensures that students start teaching in the classroom early on, complemented by informal learning experiences that enhance their preparation. This leads to a new generation of passionate, highly qualified secondary STEM teachers who in turn inspire future generations of STEM students. So far, we have prepared 575 diverse secondary STEM teachers, and the program continues to grow, with much of this growth tied directly to our Noyce programs. Now, let's discuss our Track 3 initiatives. Our first Track 3 Noyce grant was awarded in 2018 and is currently in a no-cost extension. The Master Teacher Fellows in this cohort received a master's degree in STEM education over the first 14 months, followed by $10,000 annual salary supplements for the next 4 years. Master Teacher Fellows served as mentors for our pre-service teachers. They studied culturally responsive pedagogy, led professional development locally, regionally, and nationally, and even engaged in policy advocacy. We learned a great deal from this first grant, which informed our recently awarded Track 3 grant. First, our recruitment strategy was robust, involving a widely attended webinar, the University of Houston's application process, and Zoom interviews. We ran 2 cohorts and focused on increasing the diversity from the first cohort to the second. We tailored our messaging to be more culturally responsive and analyzed the demographics of teachers and students in specific schools. As a result, we increased male participation from 27% in cohort 1 to 44% in cohort 2. We also saw a significant increase in Black and American Indian teachers in the second cohort. We faced several challenges during this grant. As the Master Teacher Fellows developed their leadership skills, many were recruited out of the classroom into leadership positions. And so while the $10,000 salary supplement was an incentive to stay in the classroom, it wasn't always enough to keep them there. Another significant challenge was the timing of this grant during the COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted the education sector, which I'm sure you can all relate to. Many teachers face unsustainable conditions at their schools, and some left the profession. In response, we learned how important it was to remain flexible and adjust our plans. Sometimes we had to abandon planned professional development sessions in favor of simply checking in with the Master Teacher Fellows and understanding their immediate needs. We also sent out surveys each semester to assess their challenges and tailor professional development to meet those needs. Another challenge came from the length of the grant and the varying levels of commitment from the different PIs on the grant. Thankfully, other members of the Teach Houston team stepped up, helping to ensure the success of the project and setting the stage for our current Noyce Track 3 grant. Our recently awarded grant is titled Developing STEM Teacher Leaders in Culturally Responsive Classroom Management, Engineering Design, and Induction, but we call it STEM Lead for short because that is also a mouthful. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the amazing members of our grant team who come from the Colleges of Natural Sciences and Mathematics, Education, and Engineering, along with a consultant from Georgia Tech. The team members include Gerard Henderson, Virginia Rangel, Ramona Matier, Amanda Campos, Karen McIntosh, who I think is on this call, Carla Garza, who may also be on this call, and Roxanne Moore. In this new grant, we are recruiting 15 secondary STEM Master Teacher Fellows in the Houston area. Based on the success of the previous Track 3 grant, we believe this number is achievable. We've increased the salary supplements to $20,000 per year to further incentivize the Master Teacher Fellows to remain in the classroom. From our previous grants, we learned that many teachers lack training in culturally responsive classroom management, so this is a foundational goal of the new grant. This will help the Master Teacher Fellows share their knowledge with their mentees, novice teachers, and fellow teachers in their districts. We've also included a focus on engineering design, which is a new element in Texas science standards. Additionally, we will provide professional development to help Master Teacher Fellows become leaders in our enhanced induction program, a response to the growing challenge of teacher retention. One major component of this initiative is the creation of an online professional development platform for culturally responsive classroom management and engineering design, broadening our reach. Based on lessons learned from previous grants, we put a lot of thought into assembling our current grant team. We made sure that the team members' strengths aligned with the project goals and that everyone is deeply committed to those goals. Our grant team meets weekly for at least an hour, especially in the early stages of the grant's rollout, as we're just in the beginning of this grant. Our current grant team has built strong trust, having worked together on both prior and ongoing projects. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about recruitment. Strong district partnerships are essential for the success of this grant. Districts play a crucial role in spreading the word to potential candidates. It's important to continuously maintain these partnerships as they will be key during grant implementation. The team must also develop an effective recruiting tool. We spent considerable time on this and still underestimated the time required. We found it helpful to highlight the attributes of the ideal STEM lead candidates and then based our application forms, interview questions, and protocols around those qualities. Our previous grant webinar had high attendance, so we replicated this for the current grant with an emphasis on Q&A. It is also important to develop a clear and effective rubric for scoring applicants and ensuring team consensus on both application documents and interviews. Allow plenty of time for this process and ensure the clear division of roles. Lastly, I can't emphasize this enough, having a dedicated person to coordinate all the recruitment and application materials is invaluable. This person can organize documents, create spreadsheets to tally scores, send in interview invitations, record interviews, and much more. We also learned that Master Teacher Fellows may struggle with time management, especially when tasks at their campuses take priority. So to address this, we've made professional development much more intensive during the summer and less so during the school year. We realized that leadership opportunities might pull the Master Teacher Fellows out of the classroom. So we've increased the salary supplement to $20,000 per year and emphasized the importance of remaining in the classroom for the full 5 years during the interview process. We also plan to continuously survey the Master Teacher Fellows and discuss their goals to adjust the program as needed. One challenge we foresee is related to our induction program. The geographic locations of our graduates may not align with the Master Teacher Fellows, so we may need to assign mentees based on content area or geographic proximity. We also want to ensure that Master Teacher Fellows can implement the strategies they've learned at their campuses and districts. We're planning a virtual or in-person kickoff event with principals at schools where the Master Teacher Fellows teach. Strong partnerships will be important for this, as I mentioned earlier. Although we may face other unforeseen challenges, I'm confident that with our dedicated grant team and the support of the broader Noyce community, we'll be able to find effective solutions. I want to thank you again for attending this webinar and for the opportunity to share our Noyce initiatives, which have not only strengthened our program, but have also helped increase the number of STEM majors teaching secondary STEM. Although grant implementation can be challenging, the outcomes more than outweigh the challenges. So when grants give you lemons, you can make lemonade. Or as we say in Houston, when you get lemons, we make margaritas. So keep in mind, the lessons learned in grant implementation may pave the way for future grants and may also help the broader Noyce community. So in closing, I'd like to reiterate my thanks to the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the National Science Foundation. And I'll be available for questions at the end. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dr. Evans, and I'll hand it over to our last speaker, Dr. Greg Rushton.
Matt, does that look right?
Yep, looks good to me.
Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. And I'm going to drill down just a little bit into a couple topics that were brought up by my colleagues, Matt and Paige. Let me just briefly go over some acknowledgments and our current team. So this is the, I think, 8th Noyce project that I've worked on as PI. And like Paige and Matt were discussing, it's been real nice to learn some things over the time that we've been doing this. I really like, Paige, how you said a few things about what you're doing differently this time and what you're focusing on because of how important it is. And Matt, in year 5, what you're doing now and what challenges you're facing, that's really helpful. So this is our second track 3 as well. This is our project team that is a collaboration between a nonprofit in the Northeast, Concord Consortium. That's I'm kind of pasted in there. Her name's Kate. She's a research associate there. And then we have some folks from data science and our College of Education and Ed Leadership. And then we have a project manager, and we have some graduate students there too. So that's our current track 3 team. And I just wanted, as Paige and Matt said, we're just really grateful for the sponsors of this work and the opportunity to work in the communities and to learn about teacher leadership together. So I'm going to focus on just the top 2 points here for a few minutes. And if in the Q&A, if people are interested in talking more with the 3 of us about persistence of MTS, like Paige was talking about, or school system partnerships, as both of them have discussed, I'm happy to do so. I'm going to focus particularly on project logistics and PI responsibilities, and then your project team, and making sure that group is well selected, and then also well developed over time. Okay, so for those of us who have written grant proposals before, oftentimes this happens fairly quickly. Within a few months, you're trying to put together these long narratives and all these documents and partnership letters and all that. And oftentimes what we do is we pick people that we know. And Paige made a point about this, about aligning your team members with the project goals. Sometimes it's easier said than done, right? Sometimes you can get people that are available, but they're not necessarily super well aligned. And so these projects are super long. I mean, Matt is in year 5. Paige and I expect probably to do this work for 5, 6, 7 years. We have to track our participants many years longer than that. And so we've been thinking a lot about who we need versus who we know. So assembling the team that complements the different roles that we need. Paige made the observation that having someone specifically responsible for all the application materials, for example, was really important. So I've thought about with our team some possible roles that I think are important to consider. We have some of the folks on the team that are visionary. What can we accomplish? What's pie in the sky? Let's imagine 5 years down the road. What do our districts look like? What are our teachers doing? What does our institution look like? What do our partnerships with our LEAs look like? And I think all that's really important, especially if you're trying to do this work over many years. Imagining a future that's worth the effort and the perseverance to get to is important. And as both of my colleagues have mentioned, there's a lot of details associated with track 3s, and it's very easy to get mired into the day-to-day and into the logistics. So I think it's important to have folks on the team that like that kind of stuff, like to make sure that things are running smoothly and efficiently, that communication is open and consistent. I like that annual MOU, Matt, that you mentioned, making sure that your relationships with the districts and the principals, as they turn over and they change roles, are all maintained. Another way to think about it is the wonderers. I wonder if we could do this. I wonder if we did the PD like this. I wonder if we made the margarita this way out of the lemons. Those people are really important. Also the doers, like, okay, well, all right, are we going to squeeze it? Are we going to smash it? Like, what are we actually going to do? How do you actually carry that out? And I think having both of those perspectives are really important. Sometimes PI teams can be dominated by one perspective or a few perspectives rather than complementary. And something that we're trying to be really aware of, that We're very strengths-based, that we try to be strength-based and responsive to our team's unique abilities, and also the challenges um, that we may face either personally or professionally in terms of our skills. We have found it very useful to have a project manager, not just relying on, for example, grad students, undergrads, or our PIs to do all of the coordination. There's lots of coordination with financial aid, for example, schools and districts, our advisory board, or evaluators, Office of Research, and IRB, for example. So we have a fairly large team, and we try to differentiate our roles and responsibilities so that no one is feeling overly burdened, and we have some shared governance within the team. I read during our first track 3 this book from Daniel Pink, and it's all about this idea that all of us have things that we can do really well that don't really seem to require a lot of effort to do, and trying to find that on your team. What are you really good at that's not really hard for you to do, but that you really like to do, that that gives you energy and gives other people energy, and spending time not just investing in our MTFs to try to figure out how they can lead most effectively, but also doing leadership development within your own team. So we have spent time doing that. We also have read a book recently in our center from Brene Brown, who's Paige, you may know her, from Houston. In her book, Dare to Lead, she says a lot of really cool stuff. But one of the things that she mentions that's really helpful to me as a STEM faculty member. So my disciplinary training is in organic chemistry, and so we don't think about feelings, we don't acknowledge feelings, we just think in our work. And people in natural sciences oftentimes think that they're only left-brained, and they don't have, either it's atrophied, it's irrelevant, but that right side of their brain, their feelings and their imagination, we just kind of shut that off. But we all act from a sense of purpose. We have feelings and motivations that drive our behavior and our decision making. And she makes this point that we can either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to fears and feelings and anxieties and aspirations and dreams, or we can see when people stop showing up to meetings, and they stop responding to emails, and they stop contributing to your annual report, and they don't send that email, or they don't finish writing out their portion of the promissory note or something like that, that there's something going wrong. And you can either spend the time up front trying to figure out what really drives them, or you can try to address their behavior that's detrimental to the project later. And so we thought a lot about that. So some things that we are doing in our weekly project meetings. We do icebreakers every week. I am super uncomfortable with them. I'm an introvert. I don't like making eye contact. I don't like telling people what my favorite movie is, and what I like to eat in the holidays, and what my favorite vacation memory is. It's just not something that I am really comfortable talking about at work, but it's something that's important to build trust and rapport. And when we have conflict, we already have the social network built so that we can handle the negative emotion that sometimes can be present in these kind of intense projects. I also try to go on in walking meetings. I try to have informal lunches with my colleagues, especially the ones I don't know super well, that are not in my college or not in my department. And we also do leadership development of our faculty. So we don't just think about leadership development of our participants. We actually do leadership development of our content faculty, of our graduate students, of our project managers. We also try to do formal and informal social events, not just with our district partners and our master teaching fellows, but we also do it as a group, playing pickleball or going and having drinks or something like that. And then I've thought about this recently, about this multiple PI framework, this idea that instead of a PI and several co-PIs, we actually have multiple PIs. So the part that I really care about on the project is the teacher persistence and effectiveness through teacher leadership. That's the thing that I feel like I like to read about and think about. I like to intervene, and I like to interview and study that. But I'm not super connected to other aspects of the project. And so instead of me trying to do things that I'm not super good at or don't super love, we have a team and we ask people, hey, will you be the PI of this other thing? And then I don't have really any kind of oversight. I am the co-PI relative to those tasks. It could be, for example, recruitment or program design. We're putting our students through a graduate program. So by doing that, I think you have this shared ownership, and it's not one person's project that other people are helping with that you're trying to keep them connected to, but rather it's all of our projects. So that's been helpful for us to kind of conceptualize and work through. And happy to talk about those issues or other issues with teacher persistence or the relationships with our districts, if that would be helpful to the team. And I'll stop there and I'll stop sharing, and I will not leave. I'll stop sharing. And thank you for your time, and excited to engage in some Q&A with my colleagues and the team here.
So thanks so much, Dr. Russian. And yeah, as you said, presentations, thank you to all three of our presenters. The floor is now open for questions. So if people want to put those in the chat, you can come off mute. It's kind of up to our panelists for the rest of the webinar. So yeah, floor is open.
Yeah, so hey, hi Sarah, nice to see you. Or see your icon or avatar or whatever that's called. So we meet weekly for between an hour and an hour and a half. Those are the formal meetings. And then I try to look for opportunities to have lunch with one or more of our team members every couple of weeks. I try to go for coffee or go for a walk, do one-on-one check-ins. And then weekly, I also meet with our project manager to prepare for the PI meetings and to look at both like kind of logistical issues, but also research issues, research questions. We didn't really talk about that as a group, but you know, Track 3 doesn't have a lot of time for, or a lot of room in the budget for research. But I think if we don't spend our time at least somewhat focusing on the scholarship, then we don't really, except with Track 4 Noyce projects, we don't get a lot of understanding of what's happening in terms of what successes and challenges people are facing in these Track 3 projects. And so anyway, that's what we do. We have a formal meeting once a week, and then I have a bunch of one-on-ones or other check-ins. Maybe Matt and Paige have a different cadence.
No, I think, Greg, you alluded to, you know, maybe different meetings with different groups. So kind of our core programmatic meetings are typically once a week. We have graduate assistants that in part help with some of the administrative tasks of the work. That's maybe a short other meeting once a week or every other week. And then yeah, not as often as we would like, but the sort of folks more involved with some of the research focus of the work, we meet focused on that. And so when any of myself or any others are involved in multiple of those groups, that of course starts to pile up in terms of time and meetings. But so being willing to realize like maybe we don't need to have that meeting this time or whatever. But certainly on the programming side, it'll depend on the nature of your program when it comes to your touch points with your fellows and those other activities and initiatives.
Paige, you want to talk at all about attrition and maybe replacing MTFs, because you had some of those challenges possibly during COVID?
Yeah, we did. So we had a couple of them, just maybe it ended up being like 3 that ended up leaving the teaching profession altogether, just because what was going on at the campuses. You know, after they discussed it with me, I was like, yeah, that's not sustainable at all. trying to teach every conference period and work with kids before school, after school. I mean, the things that were going on were, and the pressure was just too much. And so they left. I mean, I've maintained contact with them, but what we did instead, we were able to use the funds for, we extended it a little bit on our last one, and the current lead fellows, of course, we asked for permission, you know, from the program officer, but the current lead fellows, what they did is they served as induction specialists because we felt that was a great need, which led into our current grant, which is all about induction. And so actually a difficult situation ended up turning into this Noyce Track 3 grant that we have now. So yeah, we had about 3 leave the profession. Now, one that didn't finish from cohort 1 was not successful in the master's program. So what we were able to do, since we had 2 cohorts, for cohort 2, we had 16 instead of 15. And so we were able to make that up. So that's how we dealt with that.
Yeah, I think that ability to replace a fellow is contingent on how early that departure happens, because even if you have the 2 cohorts, they're those first 2 years, and then you have the rest of your grant, there's a 5-year commitment. And so logistically, it's hard to add someone late in the game, funding aside, and permission aside from your program officer. But early on, there's some opportunities to fill those gaps if they present themselves.
And
Yeah.
I'll just give you our process too. We were really concerned in our first track 3 and in this one as well about attrition. We spent close to a year actually thinking about the selection and recruitment process, and we actually did it through a three-stage process. We had well, first of all, we interviewed current teacher leaders and tried to figure out what they would have looked like before they began their teacher leadership roles. So try to imagine a profile. Then we tried to communicate that to our school partners. Hey, these are the kinds of folks that we're looking for. They have potential. They look like they're emerging, but they're not quite there yet. And then we had the school do a selection process. We had the district do a selection process, and then we did a third stage. And in each stage, we asked them different things, and we just really spent a lot of time vetting them. We didn't have any attrition in our first one over 6 years, which was really great. Not that I think we did anything particularly unique, but I think spending some time making sure that you're getting folks that really are committed to teaching and not just staying in education was really important for us. And I just recommend that for any PIs that are considering that. I think there's a few other questions here, you guys, about logistics. Lauren's question about the graduate certificate the first year. Yeah, you can have different promissory notes. I mean, ours is probably going to actually follow something like that, because the first 2 years they're going to do a graduate program and then just do salary supplements after that. So I think we'll have provisions within the same promissory note rather than 2 different promissory notes for that. And we're happy to share any paperwork. Matt is in year 5 of his. He's probably got some pretty good documentation from his financial aid folks.
We didn't have that switch of the way people were getting compensated, but it's speaking of COVID, so we got word of our funding like a week before everything shut down. So it was hard to get things sorted out on the front end, but eventually and yeah, I mean, there's questions about, I think at institutions, there's maybe it's a little more well-worn in terms of compensation through scholarships and tuition versus through payments, especially payments that have some strings attached the way they do or could. And so eventually we just had to get with our general counsel's office, and they wrote a contract agreement that people sign. And so I could imagine, Lauren, in your case, something like that would just be the contract lays that out very clearly. They sign on that. You, of course, might need to work with different units in terms of the finances of it, year 1 versus the other years, but it definitely seemed like creating a a particular agreement for this was ultimately the best solution.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
And we're
it's my institution has had a track one before, so the whole tuition thing is easy. Like that's simple and straightforward. And my projects assistant director has been meeting with general counsel, and I just didn't know if anybody had a template or something that they could use as a jumping off point.
We're happy to share
Yeah,
whatever
sure.
paper. Yeah, just email us afterwards, and we're happy to do so.
Thank you so much.
Sure. And then question about MTS learning about leadership. I mean, we have that some built in through professional development, either internally or externally. You can do it through degree programs. We have, you know, who they think are teacher leaders, and they come and do professional development. So there's lots of different ways that we do it formally and informally. In terms of tracking, I mean, I have some thoughts about how to do research and track their identity development, track their role development. One way that we found it particularly cool to study is actually to video and audio record all of the meetings with our fellows and actually listen to how they talk about themselves, their colleagues, their administrators, the opportunities. So one construct, for example, is locus of control. You see your future being dictated by the system, by other people, by if I have a good principal, if I have a good department chair, if I have good colleagues, if I have good students, if I have good parents, if I have good community members, if I have good professors, right? When I'm under those kind of good conditions, I can thrive. When I'm in kind of the bad situation, I can't thrive. So that's an external locus of control. If you can start seeing over time where they're like, no, I actually know how to navigate. I actually have self-efficacy. I actually have a set of skills. I actually have a support network. I know how this system works, and I know how to navigate it successfully. You can start seeing that they are recognizing that they have more agency, they have more power than they recognized before. That's one example. You can also track it, you know, in terms of documentation, focus groups, and interviews and surveys, like have a list of all these things that they could be doing that we know from the literature that teacher leaders do, and have them check it off and do some mixed methods on that. We have instruments if you are interested in us sharing, for example. I'll let Matt and Paige talk about that.
Yeah, so what we do is we just do a simple survey, but along with that, when you do the reporting on the Noyce Track 3, it does specifically, it has like this whole big list of things, but we are very purposeful in the leadership component of what we feel that they're ready for in a particular moment of time, realizing that some are ready for larger leadership roles and some may not be ready for the leadership roles. We're really flexible with that, but we actually just do a simple survey to capture that information. I don't know if Matt wants to talk about that or if we want to go on
Jump
to
on
the...
in, Matt. How do you guys track? And
Yeah, ours is, I mean, I'm sure at some level, any track 3 grant probably has the leadership work is core to the project, because that's part of the commitment, is that they're fulfilling that in their context. Our version of that is, you know, we have this statewide network, and their leading of a local team as part of that network is very clear that that's what they're doing, and if they're doing it or not doing it. I do think it was interesting to hear from Paige and Greg about, you know, being really intentional that people need to be developed as leaders. And so whether that be readings or how they come to see themselves as leaders and different attributes of that, and then collecting data. So as a network improvement community, we collect data for research purposes as a project team, but they themselves collect a lot of data. And while there's a lot of data about students in the math classroom, we also collect a lot of data about our fellows leading these teams, and that gives them something to reflect on. We also try to build a lot of protocols, like how do you run a meeting? Some of what Greg was saying about their own project team meetings, having a kind of opening icebreaker and ways to build community before you get into the business of things. First, good lessons for ourselves, but then also we support fellows to think about that for the meetings they are running with their colleagues. So resources, opportunities for reflection, And like Paige mentioned, being open to the fact that people are on different trajectories in terms of being a leader, being seen by others as a leader, and seeing themselves as leaders, and what's the role that this project can play to be responsive to those different points along the trajectory.
That's great. Hey, will you guys talk a little bit about how wide your net is that you recruit from, in terms of like geography relative to your institution, and how you carry out the PD? I'll jump in and just say, previously when I was down in Atlanta, they all drove in. We did it typically on a Friday or on a Saturday. Initially it was Saturday. The teachers were like, there's no way I could ever leave my classroom. My students would just die and I could not get the time off. And after like a year or two, they're like, okay, I guess this is important stuff. My kids are fine, you know? So we shifted to during the week, but they would drive in. This one, we're probably going to do some, now that we have had COVID and we know what Zoom is and can actually have a reasonable, conversation. We'll probably do some hybrid stuff this time. And we're recruiting mostly from rural districts that can be 2 or 3 hours away. So we'll likely do for those kinds of things, probably some online things, but we'll also do some face-to-face, as Paige said, focusing on those things in the summer when people can come in and not be so rushed with their schedules. So how about you guys?
So for us, Houston, is huge. You can drive for an hour and still be in Houston. So ours are they're urban. And so how many districts? A lot. I don't know. But we partner currently with 10 to 15 school districts. And somebody asked a question about logistics. How many school districts? We would like to have a couple from one district so that they can work together and put on leadership things in the future for their district and feel more comfortable. If we could get 2 at a campus, that would be amazing. That doesn't always work, but it may in some cases with this particular grant. And so we are going to do things in the beginning, definitely in person, to build community, because that's really important so that they can rely on each other. And in the summer, it will be mostly in person, and the summer will be pretty intensive, probably about 4 weeks, because somebody asked about what is the time commitment. It'll be about 4 weeks in the summer, but a typical day is not going to be like 9 to 5 or anything like that, because we have Houston traffic. So a typical day will be in the middle, so we don't have to worry about Houston traffic, and I won't have to either, as well as the PI team, because so it's more like 10 to 3 would be a day, with the expectation that they would do stuff outside of that. Then during the school year, we're going to meet once a month. If it makes more sense to meet in person, we'll meet in person. But if it makes more sense to meet virtually, we'll do that. And that will just depend on what activity we're on. So the goal is to have purposeful time in the summer to actually create things that they can use for their classroom, the culturally responsive classroom management and the engineering design processes, and then to focus on implementation during the school year. And when we come back together, for them to share what worked and what didn't work and what could be improved. So that's our plan currently.
There are probably more students across all of Houston than in the entirety of West Virginia. So we, like Greg said, are pulling from more rural contexts. We have districts and schools across the state. We do have a summer institute, 4 days in person over the summer. We also have in-person meeting time associated with our state NCTM affiliate conference. That's in March. We've started also a half-day fall convening to kind of kick off the year. But otherwise, we planned all along. This was, of course, accelerated with COVID, but planned all along to have mostly virtual interaction. But I will say what was amazing was we started in the context of COVID and went a year and a half for our first cohort before we met in person. But how clearly people had built relationships entirely in that virtual context. And these are people who were dealing with professional and personal challenges during that time. It was so clear how valuable that opportunity for network and community was. So that even, people hit it off right away that first time they were in person. Kind of process and workflow, a couple questions here. We meet with our fellows. Monday evening has been our standing time for a Zoom call. That's every probably 3 weeks, though. They are doing work weekly, either kind of out of meeting assignments or with their local teams. Last night, we actually had what we call a whole network meeting that includes all the other teachers that are participating. At 8 o'clock at night on a Monday, we had 120 people on a Zoom call, sharing updates from their latest testing cycle and giving feedback to one another. So our fellows, we say on average a few hours a week, at least. People they're working with, maybe an hour a week as they're doing their improvement work. And in all cases, that time is either allocated during the school day by a school, they build it into existing PLC structures, or teachers, not our fellows, other teachers get compensated for, their hourly off-duty time as part of the MOU, which is pretty neat as well. So people are getting compensated for that effort.
Just want to be mindful of time. Maybe Drew, make sure that we're not doing too much past what you expected. But there's a couple more questions here about movement of MTFs after the program, and then also focus of the leadership role. So Drew, what are we done at 3? Or are we done at 3:15? What do we got?
We got till 3:15.
Okay, well, I'll tackle first this one about movement. From our first track, 3, we had a mixture of both folks that were maintain their role in the school, and then something that I have been kind of resistant philosophically to, which is the movement of teacher leaders out of the classroom. And I'm trying to imagine so hopefully we're going to get a track 4 funded here soon to actually study this, but what is the ideal workload for a teacher leader? Is it 2 classes of instruction, and the rest of the day they're writing grants and they're doing research and they're developing professional development? Are they essentially an instructional coach? Are they an assistant principal? Are they what are they? Are they a department chair? And I think there's a continuum there. There's some folks that really thrive in the informal role. Some people really thrive in the formal role. Some people thrive kind of in the middle there. You think about our roles in higher ed. I mean, that's true for us as well, right? And some of us teach more, still do leadership, but in different ways. And so, we've been supportive of our folks moving into formal roles. I mean, I think who better than someone that's been in a Noyce Track 3 to help lead a district initiative, to be the next assistant principal, to be a curriculum, instructional coach. So I've kind of come around that if they're not staying in the classroom, we haven't been successful, even if it's 15 years down the road. So that's been our experience. And then we can tackle the question here from our colleague writing the proposal too, but I'll leave it up to Matt and Paige to weigh in on the movement of MTFs after the program.
So ours have done both. Some have stayed in the classroom and some have gone on to become instructional coaches or assistant principals and things like that. But it's very mixed. I mean, some of them really have that passion to stay in the classroom, but they've taken on different roles like team lead, department chair. Some have gotten involved at the state level and at their district level with policy advocacy, which was a goal of our grant. So that's pretty cool to see that happen. So I'd say it's mixed, and I agree with Greg that they're really suited to take on a leadership role after this experience. And if some want to do that, then they'll be in a position to have maybe greater influence.
You're hearing Greg talk about the different wonderings about the types of roles. It really, sometimes there's a critique of projects, which is like, does it only live as long as the project is funded? Some of this is out of our control, but beyond the life of a project like this, what would even, does the role exist, right? And not just from a compensation standpoint, but like, is there a structure where someone is half and half or has a defined leadership role while being a teacher? So especially when we think about folks who would stay in the classroom, it is really important to know what the thing is after a project like this. And that's certainly, I talk about locus of control. That's outside of our locus of control as higher ed project teams, but we've tried to, in our work with districts, say, what would it look like for districts to invest and continue this work and compensate someone to lead it and be part of a continued network. We've had some interesting developments on that point, but it's gotten to the point in the life of our project where it's like, gosh, if we don't make some inroads on that, what would happen after the project? So, but you need the definition of what those roles even are to live outside of the support that a Track 3 project is giving.
Maybe one thing that I'll say here in closing, and then I'll leave it up to Matt and Paige as well to give some closing remarks. So in terms of like what you focus on in terms of leadership development, we have actually done some thinking about this, and we've actually done some research on it. So if you think about identity development, for those of us who are in K-12 and now are in higher ed, when was it that we started thinking about leaving K-12? A lot of us, it was during our graduate school, right? We're possibly still connected to K-12 in some way, but there's an identity development shift that happens when you become a teacher leader. So you start to see and Matt said this really eloquently earlier, you see yourself differently, people see you differently, your role actually changes, the way that you function in the system changes. So I think that identity development can happen synergistically with your teacher identity, or it can actually happen in competition with, and actually somewhat cannibalize the K-12 teacher identity. And if you think about the networks that you connect people to in teacher leadership, if they tend to be outside of the school, they tend to be like at the national level, professional organizations, policy work, things that tend to be kind of inconsistent with the role of a teacher, just in terms of schedule, for example. If you're going to go down to the state capitol and have some meetings with legislators, it's hard to do that if you're trying to also teach at the same time. So sometimes just logistically, the way that you position teachers makes it difficult for them to actually carry out that leadership work while being a teacher. So we have thought in this project specifically to aim the leadership activities so that the identity development happens as in alignment with district goals, so that the way that their leadership is directed is towards the school, towards the district, towards the local community, so that their leadership identity develops as kind of like an elder, as someone responsible for that community, responsible for that school, and they become more committed to that the local community rather than connected to and more committed to an external community. That is one way that we're thinking about developing teacher leaders so that they stay rather than want to leave. It is an experiment. We're going to I'll let you know in 2 or 3 years if that is happening or not, but it is at least something to consider when you are designing your professional development, how much you are sending the teachers out to be connected to people outside of the schools and develop an identity in those communities, rather than being connected to relationships and networks within their communities. Just an idea to think about.
So ours is a little bit of both. They start with their leadership, but as I mentioned earlier, a large part of ours is with the induction. So they start with our inductees, year 0 to 3 teachers. And so we have it scaffolded to where they might first put on a roundtable, then a professional development. But the hope is that after they do that with our group at our new teacher academy over the summer, that they can take this and put this on at their school or district. And so that's kind of how we have scaffolded it. And we had success with that in our first Noyce Track 3 grant. This one has different goals than our other one, but we're hoping that we can have the same scaffolding process. Now, the other part of the question, and I'll just do that real quick because we're running out of time. Do we narrow the focus? We included many different types of leadership roles and prepare them for those, knowing that some will gravitate towards one leadership role versus another, and that's okay. And I think I will pass it over to Matt for last comments.
I'll just say quickly, I think on a lot of points, there is a lot of flexibility, but maybe it's for your own sake, your team's, your project team's sake, and your fellows' sake to do find ways to narrow down the focus. Sometimes that a focus and kind of thematic ties of what your project is about or what keep it going in that third, fourth, fifth year, because you kind of can look back. There are times we'll look back to our proposal and go, whoa, we actually were onto something there, right? Because otherwise it could be a lot of possibilities, which is, yes, flexible, but could be really overwhelming. So, you know, somewhere in the middle there could be beneficial to you and your team.
It's your turn, Drew.
Awesome.
Take us home.
Thank you three so much. That was really, really wonderful. I'm just gonna pull up our closing slides here for some final remarks and then get y'all going on your Tuesday. Yep. One more time, I'd just like to thank our Track 3 speakers, the rest of the AAAS Noyce team, and all of you who are able to join and participate today. This is the second installment in our 2024 series. Tracks 2 and 1 will be covered this week and next. We have the lineup here. So we have Track 2 on Thursday, and we have Track 1 on December 17th. So yep, up next is Track 2 this Thursday with Drs. Natalie Keene and Elsa Vila. We have a survey link, which we're posting in the chat and sending via email. The survey should only take a few minutes. And this, like I said, this is our first time doing this PI peer series. So please let us know if you enjoyed it, what you'd like to see more of, what you really appreciate seeing here, so we can keep doing these in the future. I also would want to highlight one opportunity that we currently have. AAAS Arise is accepting blog submissions. The Arise project seeks to provide resources, tools, and community to foster research and evidence-based innovation in STEM free service teacher education and leadership development programs. Through the Arise blog series, we have shared information about topics and strategies for preparing STEM teachers for the future, assessing efficacy in STEM teaching, and understanding effective ways to recruit, train, and retain a quality STEM teacher workforce. In 2025, the goals remain the same, but we seek to focus on particular communities such as rural, urban, and indigenous, and on promising practices from a range of institutions such as HBCUs, TCUs, HSIs, small liberal arts, and community colleges to reach the broad collection of Noyce projects and constituencies. If you'd like to submit your work, check out AAAS-arise.org. And submissions are currently due December 16th, which is next Monday. And with that, we hope to see you for the rest of our Noyce PI peer series. Until next time, and as always, take care and thank you all so much. Happy Tuesday.